Hello, and welcome to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for the everyday environmentalist. I am Jennifer, and tonight I am joined by Chris
Hello.
and Stefan,
Hello.
and we have a guest with us tonight, Buzz, who is
Hi.
our EVangelist for those that can't see it. It's electric vehicle. So he is our guest for the evening, and we're going to be talking, of course, about electric cars, and specifically, Buzz has been a salesperson that specializes in electric vehicles since 2013. He has a blog called My Electric Vehicle Journey, and he's also on a couple of boards that help promote the electric vehicle market and just sustainability in general. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. Texas Electric Transportation Resources Alliance. And he is kind of active in that community. So with that, Buzz, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be the evangelist.
Well, it's kind of a weird journey. The first 10 years of my career, I was actually a manufacturing engineer in oil and gas down in Houston. So I went from a guy who made wellhead equipment to somebody that's trying to push electric vehicles every chance I get. But it was, and you can tell with the gray hair and all, I'm a little bit older than you guys. I reached a point in my life where I was looking for something that had meaning for my career. I went to work for Apple at a huge pay cut. I was a manager for Apple for 3 years and really enjoyed my time there. And a guy rear-ended me on the freeway. My whole life is because of a car accident. So
oh, wow.
Rear-ended. We'd had Lexuses, 4 ES300s in a row, nice, safe family 4-door sedan thing. And all of a sudden I had to find a car, and I didn't have a lot of money for the down payment. Insurance paid off the car, but that was it. And my wife was a smart one. This is back when gas was $4.50 a gallon. She goes, "What about these electric cars?" And we ended up getting a Volt. I came home one day with a Volt, and she was driving a Toyota Highlander hybrid, not a plug-in hybrid, a traditional hybrid. And she looks down her nose at my car and says, "I have no interest in driving that. That's your car." And I was like, "Well, cool." And no lie, 2 months later, she got a Volt. We revolted. But
wow.
And then about a year later, we got one for our 16-year-old. And at that point, the dealership probably thought I was some kind of freak of nature. They ended up hiring me. And the showroom manager asked me, he said, "We've never hired somebody like you before." And this is the biggest Chevy dealership in the world. I mean, this is a huge place, and you don't come in with no sales experience. And I had no sales experience. But they said, "What do you want your title to be?" And that's when I came up with EVangelist. And so I'm spreading the good news of electric vehicles.
That's so cool. And that was back in 2013, right? When did you buy your first one? 2012?
The first two were leases, and it was 2012. August of 2012 is when I got mine. And in fact, August 3rd, 2012 is EV Day for me. It's kind of like a national holiday. But
that's awesome.
About a year into it, I called up the dealership and asked my sales guy, "Hey, what are y'all doing for National Plug-in Day? Now it's National Drive Electric Week." And he goes, "Well, what's that?" And I'm like, "Oh God, Kevin, you got to know this stuff. You sell these things." And I pitched the idea, "Hey, invite all your Volt owners back and throw a burger at us, and we'll talk to people all day long because we can't stop talking about this stuff." And the dealership hated that idea. They didn't want somebody in between the salesperson and the customer. But they knew that if you walked on that lot and said, "Hey, I'd like to look at a Chevy Volt," about half the salespeople would probably try to talk you out of it because they just didn't understand the vehicle and they didn't want to look ignorant in front of the customer. It's just a natural human nature sort of thing. So they had asked me to come in and speak to their sales meeting about why I thought this car was so important for General Motors and so important for the country. And during that speech, I didn't know it, but the general sales manager leaned over to the showroom manager and said, "That guy ought to be working here." And 3 days later, I was. And since then, we've built a EV and hybrid. It's really kind of a learning and sales center. So you can come in and watch videos, watch slideshows on the televisions. It's because of my time at Apple, it looks like an Apple store. There's these wooden tables every so many feet, and there's displays on the wall that are constantly playing slideshows and video programs about electric vehicles. And it's become a really neat place of community. But, back to being the older guy, I was just looking for something that would have meaning in my life. And I believe the climate is changing. I believe that we've got to do something soon, and it's got to be dramatic. And I think it will be. I think it's coming, guys. There's a tipping point. There's reason to be optimistic. But I think you're going to see such change in transportation in the next 5 years. It's just going to blow your mind.
That's awesome. It's interesting that, yeah, that's a big motivator for a lot of people. But, I actually found out about Buzz through an article I read online about the process of buying electric vehicles. And this girl was saying how difficult it was for her to find a dealership, like you said, that would answer her questions, that would not try to steer her away from it. She was very determined, like she wanted an electric vehicle, but she had to kind of talk them into it, or I think she may have eventually found you and gone all the way up to Dallas to purchase hers, which is a shame because there's people that want it. And so why aren't more dealerships making this a priority? Why is it so challenging for people to get these cars?
Well, that's the interesting thing being on the inside now, because I never knew how commission sales or car dealerships worked or anything. And to a point, the management can direct the salespeople to do stuff, but commission salespeople are they're self-centered. I mean, they have to be to survive, and they are going to go sell what makes them the most money for each minute that they input. And I tell customers, if you find somebody like me that specializes in the electric vehicles, you've met a special kind of idiot who will work longer hours for less money. Because, the fact of the matter is the profit margin on pickup trucks or SUVs is much better than it is on EVs. And so you can really discount a pickup truck and look like a hero to the customer, or you can, sell an EV and there's just almost no discount available and you look like a skinflint. And it's a much more educational sale. Moving somebody from gasoline to electricity was just like working for Apple and helping people move from Windows to Mac OS. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of doubt. The perception is the thing they're buying is much more expensive. What's going to justify that cost? And very rarely does an electric vehicle customer come in and buy that first time. All the time with pickup trucks, people come in and want to buy one, boom, you sell them a truck and they're gone. But the electric customer is going to come back 3, 4, 5 times and spend an hour with you each of those times with really in-depth questions that you'd better know the answers to. And there's a lot of salespeople that are, you know what, I'll hand that off to somebody else. They can take that and I'll go find that next pickup truck and make a much better living. So, it is a tougher world for somebody that wants to sell these, but regardless of whether you want to sell them or not, they're coming.
Mm-hmm. So I think you may have talked about we need a different model to sell these cars then, right? Like to encourage people to sell them or encourage, just people to be more educated about them. Is that something that you think is doable, or
I think it's doable, but I actually believe the very first step is the dealership needs to give that salesperson an electric vehicle for 3 months, and that's the car they commute to work in. Nothing makes you a fan of these vehicles like driving them. Actually getting in it, and the test drives that I do, one of the first things, we'll turn onto this back street and I'll say, okay, both hands on the wheel, I want you to be ready for this, and I'll tell them, punch it to the floor. And you'll see this biggest smile that you've ever seen on somebody's face when they feel the torque and the acceleration that these cars have. Because everybody thinks it's going to be like having to eat your vegetables. Yeah, I've got to do it for the planet, and I've got to do it for the environment, but God, this is going to suck. And then they find out, no, it's actually so much fun. I could not be the EVangelist if I didn't have acceleration. I love how fast my Volt is off the line.
I have a quick question. It's kind of for Jen. Ray was just listening. My husband is a massive gearhead. He loves cars. He's worked on 1 million cars. We are very, very interested in getting an EV. Unfortunately, here in Ontario, the current government, we have a conservative government here, the Premier Doug Ford scrapped all of our government incentives to buy EVs. So that makes it a little bit harder, but he wondered if he could just jump on and fangirl a little bit about all your
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's like, can I jump on? He wrote, these are all his questions in the last 5 minutes that he wanted to ask.
Ray is always welcome on the show. Okay. But yeah, I didn't even think, we're doing a car show. He should be on because he does always talk
there
about
he is. Just a second.
So for those listening and Buzz, Ray is actually on a couple other podcasts that we do through the Epically Geeky channel, Epically Geeky and Marginally Geeky. So Ray is a veteran podcaster, but yeah, Ray, ask away.
He's getting the mics up.
Sorry.
I told him about this.
Sorry.
He must have forgotten about it. Should I take these out now?
Okay.
Yes. Hang on one second.
And if you wanted to come down to Texas to buy your car, I'm sure
It may
Buzz
be
would be
cheaper.
more than happy. Yeah, maybe cheaper and
Might
easier.
be cheaper buying it.
Dallas Fort Worth Airport is right next door. I'll pick you up.
There you go.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, it was.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you for letting me join. It was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was. I remembered briefly that we were talking about this topic, and I'm so excited about it because we are looking at getting an EV at some point, and it's just a matter of when. And I have a lot of questions, and there's some things going on right now in the industry. I'm a car guy. I am.
He's an EV. He works at a dealership.
Yes, I gathered that one. So I love cars. I'm driving a Mini Cooper S. It's a 2005. It's a fun little car to drive. But anyway, yeah, that's, I've always been a fan of cars that are still fun to drive, but also that are at least better for the environment than other options. And so, yeah.
It all kind of started when we watched the documentary "Who Killed the Electric Car."
Yes.
Great documentary.
I haven't seen that.
It's
Did you see Revenge of the Electric Car?
I haven't seen it yet, but I know it's out. Yeah.
Who Killed the Electric Car? I'm writing that down.
It's a good one.
It's going, yeah.
A classic.
Yeah. Didn't realize
it is now.
It is now. Yeah. It's like.
So sorry, are you okay if I'm asking these? I didn't mean to hijack.
No, far away. I think it's actually really beneficial for someone like you to ask, about the car aspect, because I think most people listening to the podcast would be more interested in the environmental aspect. So
so
this is good.
Okay, good. Well, I'll start with the easy one, and that's, is there any upcoming battery technologies that we should be keeping our eye out for? I know that we're constantly trying to get these cars to go farther and farther, or at least better in the colder climates. So is there anything that we should be keeping our eye out for?
Well, I think you're seeing the last of the companies that didn't have liquid cooled batteries will start to do that next year. It's pretty much proven that down here in the South where it gets really hot, you got to have a liquid cooled battery. But that's finally happening across all the brands. There's all sorts of stuff that you read about that's theoretical, solid state batteries, graphene capacitors. Think that we're at 1912. Okay. This is the gasoline engine of 1912. And you're saying, what more could we have than this? What's the next thing? And look where we are now. We're at that kind of stage with electric vehicles. We're just scratching the surface, and these cars are already fantastic to drive.
Yeah.
Now, I actually, one of my articles on my blog I wrote was this 238 miles of range that the Chevy Bolt EV has. Is this bragging rights? Who really needs that? If you can fill up your gas tank at your own home every night, plugging it into a wall, do you need 238 miles of range? Do you need to pay for that battery pack? And if you're not planning on driving across country, I'd like to actually see them offer a smaller battery pack version of the Bolt. Bring that price down for me and let me give that as an option to my customers. So I think you're going to see a maturation of the market. So, the quick answer to your question, and I'm terrible at quick answers. I'm sorry about this.
It's okay.
But, there will be technological advances. There will be 500-mile cars. There will be batteries that are stable forever. But even with today's technology, we don't know what the limit is yet. There's a Chevy Volt owner out there that has 450,000 miles on his original battery pack.
Wow.
Yeah. How many cars have you kept for 450,000 miles? In fact, beyond that, how many used cars have survived to 450,000 miles?
Wow.
This has already happened. So the technology's there. A trap that I fell into before I got my first Macintosh is I'd had an Apple II Plus. And the Mac, came out with that wonderful Super Bowl commercial, and I really got sucked into the idea of the Mac, and I would subscribe to Mac World. And I'd be this close to pulling the trigger on this new computer, and I'd read, oh my God, in 3 months, they're going to be able to do this. I'll hold off. And I bet I held off for 6 years. And the thing I want people to know, even if you can't afford a brand new one, even if in the US you don't qualify for the entire federal income tax credit, now that the first generation leases have ended, there are inexpensive EVs out there. You can dip your toe in the pool and not cost a fortune. And you can experience what I've only been driving them for 6 years, but I'm one of the old timers, believe it or not, in this field. But you can experience what we're so jazzed about and what literally has changed my life.
Yeah.
So, don't wait. Don't worry about what the next technology is. Jump on board now. If you have to find a used one to do it, to get it in your price range, do it. Read all the reviews you can. Get on the Facebook owner groups for these cars and ask them what they think about them. And you'll pull the trigger and you will not ever regret it. It'll be the coolest thing you've done. I pulled up to a stoplight and a white Corvette pulled up in my peripheral vision to the left. And I knew that one of my neighbors here, who's a good buddy of mine, had bought a Z51 C7 Corvette. The light turns green and I punch it. And 0 to 30, this Corvette had to work hard to keep up with me. Now 0 to 60, he blew my doors. But as he passed by, he gave me the V for Volt thing. So he showed respect. I'm telling you, will, especially if you're a car guy, it doesn't have to be about the environment. It can be about just the pure fun of driving.
Yeah. That's it. And sorry.
I was just going to ask a related question. What is the lifespan of a battery today?
We honestly don't know. And the lifespan for the car is not what the lifespan will be for that battery. What I mean by that is you might allow your battery to go to where you're only getting 75% of the original range. And by the way, that guy at 450,000 miles on the Volt had no measurable degradation. So we still don't know how long he's going to have that full 35 miles of range every day from the original Volt. But, it's not a concern. If at some point the new modular batteries start to go bad, they can pull out a few cells. You don't replace an entire battery pack. One of the questions I always get is, what's it going to cost me to replace the battery pack? You're never going to, so who cares? It really comes down to that. They're that reliable now, and they're only going to get better.
Yeah, that's a big argument I always hear is, but the batteries are so expensive, and when you have to replace them, it's like, replacing XYZ on your car that runs on gas. But you don't have the maintenance that you have on a gas car. You don't have the oil changes and, you got to replace your tires, but essentially your motor is just everything that connects to the battery, right?
EVs brakes are even especially with the new regeneration technology that they're using, the brakes, you're even saving on brakes because you're using the engine to slow yourself down, which means that you're actually creating more electricity.
And that guy with the Volt was on his original brakes as well, is what I've read. I mean, can you imagine 450,000 miles on your original brakes?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
So how much money do you save over the life of your car by not doing all that? Jeez.
Well, I can tell you that I used to spend, now this was an ES300, 22 miles per gallon, but I used to spend about $2,200 a year on gasoline. And with electricity and gas combined last year, I spent $334.
Wow.
Now that's over 1 year. Now, I've got to throw some other caveats in there. Back when I drove gas cars, gas was more expensive than it is now. But it still is a substantial savings. Because the gasoline engine in the Volt almost never runs, the computer tells me when it's time to change oil. So in every Volt I've owned up to this point, the first oil change comes up at the 2-year mark. So, most people are doing oil changes every 3 to 6 months. I'm doing them every 2 years. But the coolest thing, believe it or not, is not going to a gas station. It's just going home. There's the cord, plug it in the car, walk in the house, go to sleep. And every day you walk out with a full gas tank, basically, as much range as that battery pack has. And once a year when I have to go buy gas, I actually pull up to the wrong side of the gas pump because I'm thinking of where the charge port is rather than where the gas port is. and I have to do that 180-degree embarrassing turn in front of everybody. But I will stand there and look at all of you people, and I think, you guys do this every 5 days or so. You get out of your car in this smelly area, and
Suckers.
you stand out here in the
Yeah.
heat or in the cold, and you do this. And I've actually had potential customers say, well, isn't it a pain in the butt to have to plug your car in every night? No, that's at home. A pain in the butt is having to go down to some gas station and stand outdoors, and the guy comes up and says, hey, man, I don't have any money. Can you give me $1 so I can get home? And then the card reader's not working, and the intercom comes on. Oh, you got to come to the cashier to pay for this thing. Ah!
Yeah, and with me, it's about every 3 days because my commute is it's over 60 miles one way. So I drive like, yeah.
Even carpooling.
Yeah. But, I'm glad you talked about cost of ownership, because I think that's a big question a lot of people have because they're simply not familiar with electric cars, EVs. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think there's a perception that, hey, these cars are more expensive and, I'm looking to save money. Over the lifetime of the car, though, would that even out?
Oh,
also the electric costs.
If you think about it, even if I'm only saving $1,000 a year, let's say. Now, I just got a Volt, and it was top of the line, just about every option car, and I think I spent roughly $40K, let's say. Well, then the government incentives available to me where I live are about $10,000. So now we're talking about a $30,000 car. And if I go, and that $2,200 a year, or actually it was $1,900 a year I was saving. Let's cut that in half. Let's say $1,000 a year is all I'm saving on oil changes, which I didn't even have in that original calculation, but oil changes, gas savings, and all that. So and I keep the car 5 years. That's another $5,000. So now we're down around a $25,000 car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And after the 5 years, guess what? The gas-powered car still has to buy more gas, and I still get to save more money by using electricity. So the savings go on longer and longer. The longer you can keep that car running, if you're satisfied with it, then holy cow, it's just going to get better and better. But and I don't know a lot of different car brands and the various models, but the closest thing to the Volt that Chevy makes is a car called the Cruze, roughly the same size gasoline power. You're talking about a top of the line Volt getting down into a mid-range cruise range of things. And I love the hatchback Cruze. I got nothing against it, but that engine is not going to go 450,000 miles. But that electric car will, and do it with much less maintenance. And
now, what are
I'm never going back. I actually test drove a gasoline convertible because they weren't selling the 2016 Volt in Texas. I had a Triumph TR6 2-seat roadster back in the mid '80s, and the customer was not trading in his convertible, but I was taking some pictures of it. It was a Pontiac Solstice GXP Turbo, bright canary yellow. And he threw the keys at me, said, "Hey, it looks like you like my car. Take it for a drive. Maybe I'll sell it to you." So I went around the corner of that same street I do all my Volt and Bolt test drives on, and I punched it in that car. And I felt the gasoline lag, and I felt the turbo lag. And I didn't even go around the block. I just did a U-turn and head back. Once you make this crossover to electric cars, yes, the money savings is a big thing. I think especially over the next few years, as we see the environment the climate getting worse and worse, and the damage that's being caused by it getting worse and worse, it's going to start being really important to everybody. But you add to that the joy of just driving something that is so carefree and so much fun to drive that it's just kind of a no-brainer. And there's a thing in the world of automobile sales called butts in seats. You can come in and ask me questions all day long, trying to get the root of the technical issues and future development pathways and savings and all that. But if I don't get your butt into the seat of that car and your foot pushed down on the accelerator, you're not going to believe anything I tell you. And so one of my very first questions when I meet a new customer is, "Hey, have you driven an electric car before?" And they'll, sometimes I say no. And I say, Well, we're going to stop right now. I said, I'm going to make your day. Let's go. And we'll go. And that's the very first thing we do. And the rest of it's downhill, because now they're excited about the car. They know it's not going to be having to eat their vegetables. And now they're just going to ask those lifestyle questions that you're asking right now and you're asking right now. But the base question is, can I enjoy driving this car, has been answered. And once we get that out of the way, the rest of it's easy, because it really is a no-brainer. Now, I was a manufacturing engineer. I'm a spreadsheet kind of guy. And before I bought or leased my very first Volt, I had to sit down and create a spreadsheet comparing it to other cars I was looking at and trying to account for savings and oil changes, savings running on electricity instead of gasoline, with no experience at all. And I just needed it to help me make that decision, since I'm a numbers-driven guy. So I created the spreadsheet, ran all the numbers, and it looked like, yeah, this car actually is going to save us some money over getting a regular gasoline-powered car, even though it's more expensive. And so we pulled the trigger, and one of the predictions that it made was that I was going to be around 75% electric, because it had 35 miles of battery range, and then it would switch to gas in my daily commute. Basically, it's crunching all these numbers. And at the end of the year, I was 74 point something electric. So it turned out the spreadsheet was pretty close. And I've refined it over time. But honest to God, guys, it's a no-brainer.
I just want to say, I think Buzz is in the right career.
Yes.
Absolutely. For sure.
I actually drive to work with a smile on my face. I know I'm going to get to show somebody something that's going to blow their mind. And it's
the best kind of job.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
But Buzz, I'm a little bit starstruck because you look and sound a lot like Dave Ramsey. So,
yeah.
I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity. I mean, you are a celebrity in your own right, but
Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine about this today. In person, I actually look like 4 different people. None of them are very attractive. Do you know who Mike is on Breaking Bad?
Uh-huh.
I look a lot like Mike if I'm sleepy or tired. And then the dad from Breaking Bad. Mm-hmm. I've got a certain pair of glasses that when I wear those, I bought the hat. So when I wear the hat and the glasses, people immediately are, oh my God. And Bruce Willis back in the, I didn't have his body, but I have his bald head. And then Donald Pleasance from movies back in the 60s. And I always hated that guy. He was the biggest wuss, I thought. But no, nobody handsome, just those guys.
Well, yeah, sorry if I can jump in again.
Yeah, Ray, go ahead.
Oh, that's right. You got a list. Listen,
he does.
Yeah, sorry.
He's been
checking it out. This is great.
Hopefully we answered a couple though through that.
Yep. Well, you guys were talking about the cost savings and stuff like that. So, there's a channel on YouTube called Engineering Explained, and he goes into the different costs and stuff like that. I don't know if you've had a chance to check him out or not, but he actually breaks it down. He even talks about a couple of different states, how much it costs to charge it. But it also breaks it down to what the CO2 levels are to charge it based on whether you're in one state compared to another. So it's pretty cool that he broke all that down. Do you think there'll be some more conversion kits coming out, much like the one that they had for the vintage Beetle? And
I think there'll always be a hobbyist market like that. The first exposure I got to a group of EV fans when I was first shopping around and got my first Volt was the North Texas Electric Automobile Association. It was people who were converting cars, they would get together and have meetings and talk about battery packs. And I thought, well, I'm an EV owner, I'll go to this. And it was so far over my head that it was a waste of my time. But I think and especially as you get older, there's this, some car from your youth that you would love to electrify, and have that. So I think that's going to be around there. But you ever listen to Click and Clack Talk Cars back on, they're not on National Public Radio anymore, but they were. A couple of really hilarious guys out of Boston. And one of the things that they said that was a real eye-opener for me is they said, don't go get that classic car that you loved as a kid. The technology today is so much better. The suspension, the safety systems, the brakes, everything is so much better that you should just go find a new car that you like and do that. So the quick answer is that that market will always be there, but I think it's getting smaller and smaller over time because it's just so expensive compared to buying one that's a mass produced, in an assembly line. But there's going to be people that there's some car out of their youth they want,
Yeah, classic Mini would be fun for me. So it's
Yeah.
Taking it that you work for Chevy, just with this quick conversation, are you excited for the new the high performance Chevy Camaro concept that was really just released?
Well, that was just a prototype. That wasn't something that they've announced for production yet. Oh, please God, do that.
Oh, I know, it's a quarter mile in 9 seconds. It's
yeah. I have all these people who drive Corvettes and Camaros tell me, I don't think I could live without the throaty rumble of my V8. And I'm thinking, well, how about getting down the track in 9 seconds?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there is a whole change coming, and I think that for some reason, masculinity has been assigned to big V8s and diesels, and lack of masculinity for some reason is being assigned to EV owners. The EV owners. Think about our current political climate. Snowflakes. We care about the environment. Blah blah blah. Yes, I have empathy. And I don't think it's a character flaw. I think it's a good thing. But I think that the definition of masculinity is actually going to change as this revolution with cars changes. And that when we realize that we have a very big responsibility as stewards of this planet, that we've got to quit, and I'm not a super religious guy or anything, but there's some phrase from the Bible where it says time to put away childish things. And, having that big pickup trunk where you can dump the black smoke out of the pipes, great kid, guess what? It's time to grow up. And I think that that's part of what we're going to see happening is people wanting to take more responsibility. Maybe even our current political climate is trying to take one step back into childhood one last time where we don't have to say the politically correct things and we don't have to be the nice, empathetic person. But it's just that it's that moment of hesitation before society moves forward. And I think that, I don't know how I got on this since I'm about electric vehicles, but I do think that there's a huge change that's about to happen to our society. And electric vehicles are just part of it. But I see a tipping point coming that the average person out there doesn't see. Even people that professional car salespeople, they just don't see this coming because electric vehicle sales is 1 or 2%. But it's growth rate, guys. It's growth rate. And when you look at how fast this is growing, it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Ray
Absolutely.
asked about the prototype Camaro. I'd like you to talk a little bit about another Chevy car, which is the Bolt with a B.
Yeah.
I know that came out just last year, the year before, and got really, really good reviews from all across the spectrum. Could you talk about the differences between that and the Volt with a V, and
Absolutely.
what person would each car appeal to?
Okay. We actually call them, at our dealership, we call them Bravo and Victor. It was, I think, insane to call them Bolt and Volt, especially with people that are hard of hearing. So if you don't mind, we'll use Bravo and Victor.
Sounds good.
Now, the Victor is a hybrid, but it's a sequential hybrid. It will stay 100% electric until the battery pack's empty, and then it'll switch to gasoline. So even though I drive 15,000 miles a year, I'm about 96% electric. That's huge. And I've got a lot of friends that had the original, say, Toyota or the Prius traditional hybrid. And if they were really careful, they could get 50 miles per gallon. I drive my car like I stole it and get the dollar equivalent around 100 miles per gallon. So what I first ask people is, how often do you drive to other cities? If you're going to go across country, I think for the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to have to really plan things. It's not going to be a car that you can just take on a spur of the moment like you can with the Victor. Now, I've driven to Chicago and back in a Volt, a Victor. So once I'm on a long road trip, I treat it like a gas car. Keep putting gas in, it's going to keep going. The only time I worry about charging is when I'm calling ahead for hotel reservations. I'll ask them if they have charging, and I'll stay at places that have chargers. But I'm only going to get, 53 miles of electricity. It's going to go to gas anyway. So if I do that, it's really just to be as environmentally friendly as I can be on a long trip. Now, on the other hand, the Bolt or Bravo is able to go in Texas from one major city to another. People have come and bought Bolts from me in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and have made it without recharging to Oklahoma City, to Abilene, to Houston and Katy, and to Austin.
To Canada?
How's that? Nobody to Canada yet. If it was all downhill, maybe. But
maybe in the springtime.
The thing that the Bolt opens up, and this came to me later, is a whole new market. So if you live in an apartment and you have maybe a covered carport and that's it, well, you're out of the EV game, because how are you going to charge your car? But what if you have such a huge battery pack that just like with gasoline, you only charge the car once a week? Well, now you don't have to charge at home. Now you can go to a public charger, plug in for say 2.5 hours, get a week's worth of electricity, just like you'd go buy, a week's worth of gasoline at the gas station. And one of my customers actually lives in an apartment, doesn't have a garage or anything. And that's the paradigm that he's living under. Now he's retired. He doesn't have to commute to work every day. But I think that the longer range electric vehicle like the Bolt, that's a market that I didn't see coming, that is going to happen because of what that car allows them in flexibility of charging. They're not having to charge every day, so you don't have to have the ability to do it at home. The Bolt is much, much roomier inside. I call the Victor a 4.5 seat car, because the middle seat and the back seat is really for a kid in a booster seat or a child seat. You've got a console that would come right up to your groin, so it's not going to be comfortable for an adult to sit there because I need a quick run to a restaurant. The Bolt battery pack is completely underneath the car. It's like the Teslas are. It's a flat skateboard design. And because of that, and because it's a 60 kilowatt battery pack, it's a giant battery pack, the car has a very, very low center of gravity and is much torquier off the line. It's slightly faster than the Bolt off the line. What's that?
0 to 60 in 6 seconds. It's 6
Oh, yeah.
Like it's
well, and it'll chirp the wheels. I know from personal experience at 40 miles an hour. Off the line, it's a 0.85 G's of lateral acceleration and cornering. Had one customer come in. It was a woman that competes in autocross, and she was considering buying the Bolt because she said all she'd have to do is put stickier tires on it. The torque off the line and the cornering was everything she'd need to compete. So now I also believe the Volt is a much more attractive vehicle. But I was still going to buy a Bolt. I mean, I have to admit, I don't like the looks, but everything else about it, driving it, is what changed my opinion on that car. And I was all set to buy it. And then I got on this board down in Austin, and I'm doing so much intercity travel, and I've got family down in Houston, that I decided one more round, I'm going to stay in the hybrid world. But if I wasn't going between cities as much, I would have gone with the Bolt this time around. Mm-hmm. I've been very comfortable doing it. Now, the Bolt being 100% electric, absolutely no maintenance. Every 7,500 miles, rotate the wheels. When you get to 150,000 miles, you finally change the battery coolant, which is basically antifreeze water.
What are the financial incentives that a resident of Texas is eligible for? And what are the rules related to that?
Now, anywhere in the United States, there's the $7,500 federal income tax credit. Now, the rules on that are, it's not for leasing, it's only for buying. If you lease the car, the lease company is the one that actually bought it, so they get the $7,500. Now, the problem with the $7,500 federal income tax credit is you have to have at least $7,500 in income tax for them to give it back to you. So I've had retired couples where for an entire year, their tax burden's maybe $3,000 or $4,000. Well, that's all the government would give them back. So they ended up leasing instead. So, but if you don't own a house, you don't have kids yet, and you make at least $43,000 a year, chances are you're going to qualify for the $7,500. If you, and I happen to know this because I got it as a slide in my showroom at work, but line 63 of 1040 from your taxes last year, if you look at that number and it's $7,500 or higher, you would probably get all that money. Sorry, Canada, these are U.S. tax laws.
Oh,
That's fine.
we're
Okay. Now in Texas, effective on June 1st, they brought back the $2,500 Texas rebate. Now this is for plug-in vehicles that are sold through dealerships. So Teslas do not qualify for this because they're sold directly by the manufacturer. But the $2,500 is a check written to you whether you lease or buy. There's about an 8-page document set that you have to fill out in duplicate and send off to the state. It takes them about 8 weeks to send you the check. I've received one of those checks from the first time they did this, and it actually arrived on my birthday, so that was cool. But yeah, you fill out some paperwork. There's some things that the dealership has to fill out and sign that goes with this. And you send it off to the state and you get $2,500. Now, at the end of the year, they're going to send you a 1099 and you're going to get taxed on that $2,500. Just be aware of that. But still, it's free money. One thing about those is I tell people, unless you're going to keep the car until you've paid it off, that is not money for you to play with. You should take that money and pay it into the car note, because that car in Texas is going to depreciate $10,000 the split second you buy it, because everybody else knows that they can go and buy a brand new one and get $10,000 in government money. So they're not going to pay you full list. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to keep the car till you pay it off, then use that money, go have a great Tahiti vacation. If, on the other hand, you think you might keep it 3 years or you don't even know if you'll like an electric car or not, then pay it into the notes so that you reduce your debt. There's been a lot of articles written that electric cars depreciate faster than gasoline cars. That's not true. In fact, I've created a spreadsheet about this, but if you subtract the money the government gave you, you didn't really pay that full list price. And when you track from that discounted price, then it depreciates pretty much like every other car, about 50% at 3 years.
Now you really sound like Dave Ramsey.
Pardon me?
I said, now you really sound like Dave Ramsey.
I am a numbers driven.
These incentives, is that only on new cars or is that used as well?
That is only on new cars. But the buyer of used car is going to also basically get some of that money just because their used car is going to be so discounted. So it will depreciate it as if it was discounted from the very beginning. And I'm telling you, like my daughter's Volt that we just traded in, the dealership has marked at $14,000. Who can't afford a $14,000 car? I know there are people that can't, I'm sorry. But realistically, if you're in the market for a car and you can afford a car, a $14,000 car that you don't have to buy gasoline for is not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, Buzz, about how a person can recharge their car in their garage overnight. Could you, what is the current state of the recharging network throughout, I guess throughout the state of Texas, because that's where you live, and probably that's what you know best. Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of this. The Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal, the punishment for that, the fine, quite a bit of it is supposed to be used for EV infrastructure. Texas is getting over $210 million of that settlement for that purpose.
Wow.
And the government has been putting DC fast chargers, when the government's been involved, in major cities. And all that does is create islands where you can't travel from one island to another. So when you introduced me earlier, you mentioned that I'm with TechCetra, and here's my T-shirt to prove it. So this is the Texas Electric Transportation Resources Alliance, and we're a lobbying group, nonprofit down in Austin. If you're in Texas and have an electric vehicle, by the way, join them, techcetra.org. It's free to join if you have a plug-in vehicle. And they're becoming your voice for the government. So we overlaid the roadmap of Texas with the grid map for the electric grid to find the most cost-effective places to put DC fast chargers. So our goal is that by 2021, there will be DC fast chargers along the major highways in Texas, especially connecting the three major population centers, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, every 75 to 100 miles. By 2023, which is only 5 miles or 5 years away, less than, a complete 5 years, our plan is that we would like to see those every 50 miles and work from the major cities towards the state borders to create, international travel throughout the United States, or interstate travel throughout the United States. So right now, and it's why I went with a Volt this time around again, I don't think the infrastructure is there to take an electric vehicle cross country, even a Bolt with 238 miles of range. You could do it every now and then, but another thing that comes up about this is that doesn't have to stop you from the EV revolution. I had a couple that had gotten a Volt from me. They'd leased it. They were coming to the end of the lease, and they wanted to look at a Traverse, which is a 3-row gasoline-powered SUV. And they had raved about their Volt to me. And I said, wait a minute. I said, what's going on? Did y'all have a bunch more kids? You love the Volt. Why are you going to a gasoline SUV? And they said, well, every Christmas we have family come in town, and, that Volt is only really for 4 people, and it's just too much hassle. We need to get a bigger car. And I call that car the 1% car, because you're now making a purchasing decision that's going to affect your family's cash flow for the next 3 to 6 years on a car's use that you're only going to use that way, maybe 1% of the time. So if you owned a Volt, for instance, you would save so much money on gasoline, electricity, and I wrote about this on my blog, that you could rent a top of the line, fully loaded Tahoe for 2 weeks at Christmas time and carry 8 family members around to anywhere they wanted to go in 4-wheel drive. So, and still save money, compared to having a gas car all year long. Yeah. So even if it's just for a daily commuter and you've got another family car that's for long distance travel, you can dip your toe in the pool today, either, find a used one, or if you can get a new one. The new technology is great and it's going to last years and years, but it's time, man. It's just that obvious once you've had one. Now, one thing y'all haven't asked is, how much does it cost in electricity to charge the car?
Oh, yeah.
That was one of my questions, Here in Texas, we've got really good electric rates. I've seen some rates out in California and Hawaii were just mind-boggling to me. But it's about $1 a day to $1.25 a day for me. So that's, a whole year's of electricity. If I drove every single day, it'd be about $365.
And you use Green Mountain, which is renewable energy, so you're still not contributing to pollution or...
Right, yeah. Green Mountain is 100% renewable energy. Now, the real world, the grid, you never know where your electrons came from. And if there are days where there isn't any wind blowing, then Green Mountain has to buy electricity on the open market, and they'll end up buying, pollution causing electricity. But their commitment to their customers, they'll then turn around and buy an equivalent amount of renewable energy from another renewable energy company. I've been a customer of theirs for about 15 years. The reason I'm a customer of theirs right now is almost 2 years ago, we put 38 solar panels up on the roof, and Green Mountain pays full retail for any surplus that I generate. So they pay me exactly what I would pay them for that amount of electricity and the Encore transfer fee. So
that's great.
Yeah, it works out well for us. We were charging 3 volts in the driveway in June. And, June's not super hot, but our electric bill was $11.50 that month. So that's pretty fine.
So that's another question I had was, you went from 0 electric vehicles to 3. Yeah. Most people think going to 1 is going to overload, my electric system or the grid or whatever. So what was your experience with that? Did you have to install any special plugs or... I've heard that some cars will charge on a regular plug. It just takes forever. So you probably want to install a better system.
I think if you commute 40 miles a day or less, a 110 charger might be sufficient. And then it's just like plugging in a smartphone when you get home. Now, if you're driving more miles than that, then how fast you can recharge with 110 becomes a limiting factor, and you can't refill that battery overnight. So you might as well get the next step up, which is called a level 2 charger. Now, level 2 charger is a 220 to 240 volt charger. A dryer outlet is what you plug into, similar to, or not similar, it's dryers, electric dryers have a 220 plug. So, but you need that to be the only thing on that circuit. So almost always you'll have to have an electrician come out and put in that circuit for you. Chargers, $550, so it's not a big deal, but it can cut your charge time down. Say in the Bolt, the Bravo, if you were on 110 and the battery was almost completely depleted, it could be 25 hours to fill that battery. But if you had a level 2 charger, then it would fill it in 9 hours. So while you slept, and you'd come out, the battery's full the next day. In the case of the Victor or the Volt, the first and second generation would fill up the battery in 4 to 4.5 hours. This year, they've come out with a faster charger in the Premier, so it's down to about 2.5 hours. But for the average person in the United States, I think 80% of us drive 40 miles or less per day. So most of us could probably get by with just the regular 110 outlet. You just need to find an outlet that doesn't have a refrigerator or a freezer or something else on it. And what I found is the best spot in the first night I brought my first Volt home, I plugged it in, it starts charging, the lights are flashing and all, I go in the house. About 30 minutes later, new car, I got to go out to see, how's it doing? And it wasn't charging anymore. It had tripped the breaker. And the reason was we had an industrial freezer and a beer fridge out in the garage, and they were on the same circuit as tripping the breaker. So quick lesson from Buzz, learn this. If you have a garage door opener on your ceiling and you've got an outlet in your ceiling, usually that's a 15 amp circuit, and the only thing on it is that garage door opener. So the only time it's pulling electricity is when you're opening or closing the garage door. It's the perfect place to plug in your charger and just hang the cable down next to the car, plug it in. You won't trip the breakers. Everything will be groovy.
So just a quick, I'm going to jump back in here if that's okay. You mentioned the whole Dieselgate and the TDI issue from VW. Do you think EVs are going to save them? I know that they're really pushing hard to get their EV game up to snuff. So,
well, the big thing that's going to save Volkswagen is that the old hippie bus that they've remodeled as an electric vehicle is called the Buzz. And so by naming it after me, Volkswagen has a lustrous future.
That was a smart move.
No, I think that when you get right down to it, and I hate to say this, but having actually worked for Green Mountain for a little while, about 6 months, the average American does not care about the environment. And we're kidding ourselves if we think that's why most people are going to buy an electric car. It's just not going to happen for that reason. And, well, I'm kind of at a stopping point there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
But I do think we have short memories because of that. I think as horrendous as that was, 99% of Americans don't think anything of it. I know a lot of Volkswagen owners got to come into dealerships like mine and say, hey, Volkswagen's having to pay me $9,000 to take my car back. I'm in the market for a new car. Yeah. So even those people who were burnt by what happened got some cash, everything turned out okay. Yeah. They probably aren't going to hold a grudge.
Yeah. Last question on my part, if that's okay.
Please go on.
So I've been doing some reading, and I saw that I'm pretty disappointed. Ford's cutting their small car segments in North America. It looks like Toyota's going to be doing the same potentially in cutting some of their small cars. I'm a small car guy. I love small cars. I don't usually fit in them, but I love them. They're a lot of fun. So is there anything that we can do to help try and maybe tell the industry essentially that we want these cars and we do love them? Like Honda's making a fantastic little EV. It's called the Honda Urban EV, something that I love. I know she hates it because it looks like it's ugly. But I love it, and but it's not coming. It's going to be in Europe this next year. But they're not releasing it to North America. And I know there's the whole standards and all that thing, but just is there anything that we can do to kind of help out with trying to get these cars here?
There are these forms you can send in to the manufacturers. Can y'all see my hands at all?
Yep.
This big, and on one side there'll be a dead president, and on the back usually some kind of a U.S. monument. And they come in different denominations, and that's the only vote they care about, I'm afraid. So as long as you've got, and I hate saying this from being from Texas, but as long as you got Bubba going out there and all he wants is a pickup truck, even though he's never towed anything in his life, never carried anything in that bed, but he feels like he's not a man if he's not in a Ram pickup or something, then we're stuck.
We
Now,
all
at
know
some
them.
point, though, like I said, I believe we're going to see. Yeah, I think that societies go through different ages of maturation, just like we do in our lifetimes. And I'm hoping that we're passing into adulthood now as a species, and that we are going to start thinking about how short-sighted we've been up to this point. I don't hold out a lot of hope for that in my lifetime, and probably not in your lifetimes either. It's going to be a slow process, and maybe climate change will drive that much faster. I hope it isn't that bad for us, but if it gets bad enough, then yeah, we've got Mad Max going on or something. But everybody buys pickups. 60% of everything my dealership sells is a pickup truck, and I've never owned one in my life. I don't understand. What's that?
Are there electric pickups, SUVs, bigger things in the works? I mean, I've heard Tesla's coming up with stuff, but most people can't afford a Tesla. And
yep, Tesla's announced a pickup truck. There's another company called Workhorse that has one that, in fact, I think they just showed it at the New York Stock Exchange maybe 2 months ago, but it's about to go into production. I'd be shocked beyond all imagination if GM doesn't have something in the works like that. The Colorado pickup, I look at that and think, if you would give that to me as an electric pickup truck, I'd be a wealthy guy.
Oh yeah.
Via Motors, Bob Lutz was co-chairman of GM. He was head of Ford, head of Chrysler at one time. Legend in the automotive industry and the father of the Volt. He was the top guy, that oversaw the Volt project. He's very despondent about the future of vehicles. He thinks everything's going to be these self-driving eggs and nothing will have style anymore. And that could be where we're going with automated driving. You never know. But pickup trucks are going to be around for a while. But anyway, what I was going to say about Bob Lutz, he's now chairman of Via Motors. And they started out by taking Tahoe's Suburbans and Silverados and turning them into Volts. And so you'd have a crew cab pickup that you plug in like a Volt, but it still has a gas engine that would get the dollar equivalent of 80 miles per gallon, where most pickup truck drivers are in the 13 to 19 mile per gallon range.
Wow.
That's going to just blow their minds when that gets out there. Right now, they're only selling to fleets, or at least last I read, they were only selling to fleets, and they were very, very expensive vehicles. But I think that I'm almost seeing a tippy-toe thing going on where, look what Tesla's done. I mean, hats off to Elon Musk and Tesla. They sold tens of thousands of Model 3s last month. General Motors, one of the largest automotive companies in the world, over 100 years old, turned out less than 4,000 plug-in vehicles last month, or sold that many. So it's not that GM can't do it. It's just that there's a whole lot of profit in those gas-powered vehicles. And if you think about the way the stock market works, especially in the world today, all that the executives are supposed to do is return investment dollars to those stockholders, and to do it this quarter, not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now, this quarter. And guess what? Next quarter, you better do a little bit better. And the quarter after that, a little bit better, or we'll find new executives. So they're all trying to keep the company profitable as it's about to enter a gigantic disruption. I mean, just think of everything that's in day-to-day life, all those gas stations out there. And what happens to all those gas cars out there as the gas stations start to dry up? There is a huge change coming.
You mean we won't be able to go to Buc-ee's anymore?
Buc-ee's will have row after row of chargers, buddy. You wait and see. That one I'm expecting. And I think what you'll see is they'll add on a multi-cineplex. If you're going to be there for a couple hours to charge, why not catch a movie? Grab it.
I've been waiting for that one because our my company that I work for, we have a few chargers installed in the parking lots, so that the people can charge their vehicles while they're there. They're getting more and more where we are. We just have a couple of small towns around us, and each town has at least 2 or 3 charging stations that are level 2. I think there's one that's a level 3 somewhere, but I'm not sure where it is just yet. But yeah, that's the exciting part, is that you do see this shift. Like, I'm seeing more and more electric vehicles where I am at work, and it's a shame that Ontario dumped the incentive program that they had going, because there was, for the long range, there was $12,000 that you could get back.
Wow.
And they recently dumped it, but we'll see what happens. Maybe our federal government can step up and replace some of that. But
come on, Justin.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been a concern for me is that either we are going to, as a country, invest in this and get on board with this, or within 10 years, we're all going to be buying our cars from China. Because this is just, guess what, guys, this is coming. I know we want coal workers to have jobs, but they don't want to climb down that mine and die.
Retrain
They
them.
like to go put in wind turbines somewhere. They might fall, but it's a much better life.
I think Jen hit it, though. There's an opportunity here to retrain people and to get them into a healthier, safer environment, in the way that, not just environment as in our environment, but in their working habits and out of the mines. And
well, in that documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car, they interviewed a mechanic, an electric car mechanic, and his hands were clean. He's like, when I work on gas engines, I'm covered in oil.
He loved working on EVs.
He loved it because he was clean. He didn't have to scrub his hands. There wasn't oil underneath his fingernails and stuff like that.
And that was the thing that I was happy about, is that they made sure that they touched on it. Like, mechanics aren't going to go out of business. It's just that they have to change what they work on, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, every industry evolves, and everyone.
Kind of a generational
why
thing.
not?
When my dad was going through his career, it was common to work for the same company your entire life. And there was a loyalty between the corporate side and the individual.
Doesn't exist.
Looked out for each other's best interests. Then, somewhere between his career and my career, it got to where you would change companies, but you'd be in the same field. So I was, a manufacturing engineer that used computer-aided design software. Then I was in the computer-aided design software industry as a consultant, so I was always in some kind of an engineering thing. And then I think what is going to be the way it is going forward is you're not even going to stay in the same career anymore. That we will have to keep reinventing ourselves. And I actually think that's a fun and exciting thing to do. I read all the time. And I'm the kind of guy that's just driven to learn. I think that's why I adopted EV so early, as I could read about it. I understood it. I thought, okay, let's do this thing. But, I'm in car sales now. And I used to think that car salesmen were the scum of the earth. I just never could see myself being one of those kind of people. And I've been shopping for a really loud plaid jacket. I haven't found it yet. But, no, really. But I went from manufacturing into software, into aerospace and defense, into retail sales with Apple, and then finally, here I am in car sales. And I think this is the way it's going to be in the future for people in the workforce. We've got to keep reinventing ourselves, and it can be fun or it can be a drag.
You've talked about the tipping point that's coming, and I remember reading recently that I think it was Volvo has committed to not having any gas-only vehicles as of the year, I can't remember what it was, 2022, 2023.
Yeah, not far off.
Yeah. And so I just wonder if it's possible to be more specific in terms of the timeline in the US at least. Like, is there any way of gauging when you think the number of new EVs coming off the assembly line will be more than the number of gas vehicles coming off the assembly line? Is that going to be 5 years
I've
off,
actually
6
written
years?
about this on my blog using a spreadsheet, of course.
Mhm.
And I believe my prediction was it would be 25% of all new vehicles, and it was either within 5 or 7 years. Now, when I first wrote this article, it was 4 or 5 years ago. And I went back within the last year and did an update to that where I was looking to see if things were trending. And believe it or not, it was trending better than I'd originally thought. So I think the acceleration is happening faster than I thought. And one of the reasons is that these cars are, they're sticky. So once you get exposed to this, you just aren't going to go back to your old ways. You're not going to go back and stand at a gas station every 4 or 5 days. You know, you're not going to go back to a gasoline car that requires oil changes. At the very least, once you've stepped into the electric pool, you'll probably stay hybrid or EV the rest of your life. And I think that's the thing that is causing the acceleration of the tipping point. Right now, if you did a search in Texas for a used Volt, you'd probably find less than 10. They just don't stay on the used car lot. They go out there, boom, they're gone. And that's a whole group of people that the way the government set up the incentives that were being locked out of this revolution, and now they're in it. And I think that I encourage everybody, if you're going to get one, lease it. And at the end of the lease, let it go back and let somebody else take over from that point and get yourself whatever the technology is 3 years later. Because the technology is huge leaps, you know, every 3 years right now. So for me, I've been leasing them. We did buy out this last lease, but I've been leasing them in 3-year increments. And I'm always amazed at how much of a leap forward it is after just 3 years. And I think with that going on, it's just starting to snowball. And it's something that I do plot on my blog. And we hit, you know, President Obama was hoping when the EVs first started, the new generations of EVs first started coming out, and this is plug-in hybrids as well. So December of 2010, the Nissan Leaf and the Volt debut. He was hoping that the U.S. would hit 1 million plug-in vehicles on the road by the end of 2015, just 3 years later. Well, it actually took us 6 years. We hit it at the beginning of last month. And before the end of this year, we will probably be at 1,100,000. So 10% increase just in the last 2 months of the year. This is a rocket ship taking off. I was fortunate at one point in my career in the computer-aided design industry, this new method of creating three-dimensional objects came out, and it was much more like constructing something in the real world. Somebody that had worked in a machine shop would understand this methodology. And it was going to completely revolutionize the computer-aided design software world. The first time I saw it, I was dizzy. And the CEO of the company that I was working for that was selling this software called all of us in because this was so new and such a revolutionary thing that we were going to be doing missionary sales for a while. Basically, it meant we were going out like missionaries, spreading the good word like I am with the EVs, and probably not get the sale. But more and more people would learn about this. The more forward-thinking ones would go ahead and get it, and then engineers would all talk to each other and go, oh my God, this stuff is amazing. And he said what happens is you start off with a very slow ramp, and all of a sudden that curve just takes off and goes vertical. Now, after it's become a proven product, after a while, it's going to level back off again, and some new product that's revolutionary is going to come along and replace that one with a new S-curve, and he called it an S-curve of innovation. And I got to ride that. You know, I went through the missionary sales part, which you're going to starve for a while. But when that thing took off, within a 3-year period, my income tripled. And I am seeing the same sorts of pressure building in EV sales that I saw in this software back in the day. And I know that I'm on the verge. You know, if I'll just not retire too early, I'll ride this rocket ship again, and it's a hoot when it does it.
Yeah.
And, you know, any of you guys that are thinking about career changes, think very seriously about electric vehicles and getting out there, whether it's in a Tesla store where it's like working in an Apple store and it's an educational job, or where you're at a real car dealership. And, you know, in a real car dealership, you're going to probably have to sell everything they sell to make a living, but eventually all these guys that I work with that are, poo-pooing electric cars, and they'll say, oh, go talk to Buzz, he knows all about them, rather than actually make the sale themselves. They're going to be looking down there and see the line of people outside my building, and there's nobody pulling up in front of their building. They're going to think, I probably waited too long to get on this bandwagon.
Yeah.
I do have
Pretty
a
cool.
question. Do we have time for one more or a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as Buzz, you need to get off, or
I have to be at work tomorrow at 10 a.m., so I can't be any more than 14 more hours, guys. It's usually hard to shut me up about this stuff, so y'all are probably going to have to pull the plug on me.
No.
Buzz, I want your life. Can I just say that?
I love what I do, man. If you're ever up in the DFW area, come by and visit Electric Avenue. Come see what we've built. It's pretty cool.
I've got a question about the auto industry in general, because with EVs being so durable and lasting for so long, I'm wondering how the auto industry is going to continue to make profits going forward. Because I know these auto companies can sell new cars by adding features and making improvements, but they probably also rely somewhat on planned obsolescence, just cars breaking down and people needing to replace them. But with more EVs on the road and less of that happening, how are these companies going to continue to, stay profitable?
That's the question they're struggling with right now. And whether it's planned obsolescence or just inevitable obsolescence, with cars that cause friction, with gasoline engines are going to wear out. I mean, it's just the fact of life. And EVs will wear out. But as I alluded to earlier, you might be ready to replace your battery pack when it's only at 80% capacity, but that battery pack can go use somewhere else, like a solar panel wall, like a Tesla wall, to take in that electricity during the day when the sun's up and then feed it back into my house at night when the sun's down, so I'm never having to buy from the grid. Well, electric cars, the cars are going to last a long time. And I think there's only so much progress that makes sense. Do I need a 10,000 mile battery? No, I'm never going to drive 10,000 miles and then not stop and at least take a nap. So there's going to be at some point we're going to hit, okay, we've got enough miles. The next thing we're going to focus on, and GM's already working on this, is how do we charge them even faster? The goal right now is 180 miles of charge in 10 minutes, and GM and Honda have joined together to work on that one. But you're right, at some point, and maybe this is what Bob Letts is terrified of, at some point, our car is just going to become utilitarian, and we don't care about styling. We don't care about colors. I think that's one of the things that drives car sales now is you see some new style, or now it's got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and I've never had that before, and that sounds really cool, or voice control radio, or it automatically hits the brakes for me if I don't see that little kid run out in front of me, or it drives itself. We see these new features and we want to go buy that car. And is that a good thing? Or should we eventually graduate to the point that cars are utilitarian transportation and we don't care what they look like as long as they get us from point A to point B? And I don't know how we develop in the long run. If the marketing people went out, guess what? We're going to buy a new car every 3 years just because it's really cool looking and has some new cool features. But the thing that keeps popping up in my mind is Star Trek. You have a transporter that will take you from orbit down to the planet and back again. Would you pay extra if the sparkles were red instead of blue? Eventually you get to the point that, hey, it got me there instantaneously. I don't care if it's stylish anymore. So, eventually we're going to get to that point with transportation. It may not be for another 100 years, but we are creatures that are attracted by shiny, pretty things. And I think that's going to continue for a while. And there'll be people that like pickup trucks, people that like SUVs, people that like two-seat roadsters. And I think that's going to drive the market for the foreseeable future. I don't think we're going to get to the utilitarian point. But again, you're going to have, yes, you're going to need mechanics, but much fewer number of mechanics per dealership. So again, the disruption is not just to, the oil industry. It's not just to transportation. It's going to be to what people do for a living. And it is our responsibility to prepare for this. We're all grown-ups here, we can read the writing on the wall. I've got friends that are working in oil and gas and they think electric cars are their enemy. No, progress is never the enemy. The enemy is we can't just keep doing the same old things and prospering the same old way. Mm-hmm. We have to keep growing. And I think eventually we'll get there where cars are utilitarian, but probably not in my lifetime, probably not in yours.
So, sorry.
I was just going to say, you have to learn to pivot, definitely. The whole industry and the mindset of the consumer is going to have to change. And you guys are doing it.
I mean, think about this program that you're putting out there. Just 10 years ago, only a major network could do the sort of stuff that you're able to do in your home now. Mm-hmm. The world's changing. The WYSIWYG revolution of the 1980s, what you see is what you get printing, is now video editing at your home. 3D printing at your home where you can manufacture parts that you need right there at your home. Everything is changing in such phenomenal ways to give us such great capabilities.
Here's a fun random question. Is it possible to pipe in like the sound of a V8 engine through the speakers of an EV?
Yes, absolutely. And I have actually thought of that. So you would have to tie it to the accelerator so that when I push the accelerator down, it revs up. So it'd be a computer generated sound. But absolutely, that can be done. Certain
vehicles do that already with the that have a V8 or a V6, and they that's already an option.
They like enhance the sound or something.
I did like I read an article about 5 years ago that they were looking to put a sound to EVs because people were going to get hit by electric vehicles because you couldn't hear them coming. One of the options was the Jetsons. One of them was the Jetsons, and I thought that was a cool sound to add.
That was actually what I wanted. I wanted to make it like a ringtone, where I can make my own ringtone, and I wanted that.
That's cool.
Now, the second generation Volt, starting in the 2016 model year, they put that noisemaker on, and it sounds like a hairdryer on low. So somebody that's looking at their phone walking into the parking lot doesn't hear that and think, oh, there's a car coming at me. They think, oh, somebody blow drying their hair. And they still step out right in front of you. Yeah. So the very first 2019 Volt arrived, and it makes this most eerie, ethereal UFO-like sound. So they changed it. And I'll have to get a recording of it out online, but it's almost like a UFO's hovering nearby or something. It's really a cool sound. So, but I do wish they do the ringtones. I would love to be able to make my own auto sound what I want.
That'll be the next thing that you can put in the next model to sell to more people. So it's
there you go.
Okay, I got a question. So this podcast is kind of about the environment and stuff. So some people are probably going to wonder, if I buy an EV, is it possible to, this is going to sound a little weird, but this is how some of us think. Is it possible to, like, once I'm done with the car, like it's reached its end of life, is it possible to recycle it? Like the actual car itself, kind of break it down and recycle its component parts?
The quick answer is yes. Even today we do that. I mean, we shred the metals, separate it from the plastics, we recycle the plastics, recycle the metals. Batteries, especially the current lithium-ion batteries, the stuff inside of there is just too valuable to throw away. So once the battery reaches the end of the life, there will be companies that are harvesting that.
Well, I was going to say, after watching the Engineering Explained video, he explains it in there that the EV cars are actually, there's more material that you can recycle in them than there is in a conventional car now. So
Cool.
and just for that reason alone, the batteries. So yeah. I have one last quick question. Sorry, and it's I know it's getting late. You were talking about the market, and I always I get frustrated with the North American market a little bit, because I look at our standards and what we have to create our cars to, and we don't let certain other vehicles in because they match the European standard rather than ours. Just curious if maybe it's time to go to a global standard, and actually that way we can kind of open ourselves up to different areas. And what your thoughts are of that. But
the thing that popped in my head right then is, can you imagine what it would be like the very first day that the citizens of the United Kingdom and Australia have to drive on the right side of the road? There are going to be so many wrecks. I wonder.
So the left and right notwithstanding, obviously that standard can change, because there are certain countries within Europe that even drive on the left and or on the right, and with the driver on the left of the car. Just curious what your thoughts are on that, though.
And realize I've only been selling cars for 5 years, and I'm just a lowly car salesman. I'm not, up in the ivory towers or anything. But I think that being an older guy, one of the things I realized is a lot of these rules that make each country's rules slightly different is to give an advantage to that country's cars to prevent trade. And so I think as long as, and I'm so liberal that this might offend people, but I think eventually the age of countries comes to an end. Why would we fight over natural resources rather than everybody joining together and figuring out the problem? We talk about all this money that we spend in Africa, and then the rulers take the money and the citizens never get it. What we should be doing is building infrastructure. We need to make new customers. And so you give them electric generating facilities and transfer lines so they can have electricity at their homes. You put in water treatment facilities and wells so that they can drink water, because guess what? Once they've got water and they've got light on at night, they need to buy something from us, and we can sell them TV programs and whatever. But we're in this age where we're so separated from one another, and our country's better than your country, and really, guys, maybe it's the perspective of being 60, but it just seems like so much of history itself is just needless squabbling.
Global standards on a lot of things would make more sense, but a lot of this stuff is superficial.
Well,
it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, because I was just reading an article to my daughter there the other day, because she's doing this thing for Remembrance Day about whether war is actually necessary and things like that. There's astronauts that have come back from space, and whether when they look back on Earth, they have this visceral change in their mind where they realize that the borders don't exist. We're all on this rock that's floating through space, and if it's not time, or like if it's not time now to start realizing that we're all in this race together, then we're in major trouble, because it doesn't exist, right? It's all made up in our own heads.
In the very near future, you're going to get to the point that an average person can at least go up for a suborbital flight, if not an orbital flight. And we're all going to get to have that visceral reaction. And it's going to change. It literally will change our perspective. And I think that's a good thing. So I think one of two things is going to cause that next step in maturation. And one is all of us being able to see this tiny blue ball for what it is. And obviously television can't do it. There are people that believe the world is flat to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's going to take getting it's butts in seats, just like in EVs. We're going to have to get their butts in the seats, send them up into orbit, let them see it. Either that or an alien invasion. One of those two things will get us to all realize that this petty squabbling we're doing among each other is ridiculous. And and I believe 99% of the time it's to enrich a very small number of people, in that country. So when, if Russia goes to war with Afghanistan, it's the top dogs of both countries that are hoping to get some more loot, and everybody else is just going to get to die or suffer. And sooner or later, we're going to see that. Now, that being said, I do think that the stand against fascism in the 40s was, at least in my opinion, that was the last honorable war. That was truly people stepping up to stop real evil in this world. But I have not seen that since then. Everything else to me has been corporate war.
Yeah, I think aliens looking down on us would say, y'all are crazy. What are you doing? You've got one planet. Why are you in these bubbles? And
What
it's
was
ridiculous. What are you
Oh.
showing us?
That's what this book is it's called Armada by Ernest Cline. He's the author of Nuclear One, and that's sort of the premise of this book. It's aliens looking at us going,
You guys are
Yeah,
idiots.
I could have been an author.
Went in the wrong field.
Again.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Well, I know we've gotten way off topic. Any other questions anyone else has before we wrap this up?
Sorry.
Okay. No,
Thanks, guys, for having me. This has been really fascinating to talk
Yeah.
about.
No, it's been
Yeah,
awesome. I just want to thank you, Buzz. It's been
yes,
really fascinating
so
discussion.
much.
You're welcome.
absolutely.
I'm honored to
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
One quick question before we wrap it up. So wanted a little bit about the range of cars. If you want to go on long trips, they're not always the best for that, because you got to stop and charge. So that's been a big roadblock for me, because I do want to be able to drive cross country. I go to Austin a lot. I go to Dallas, San Antonio. That's 2 or 3 hours, and I want to be able to go there and back without having to wait, 3 or 4 hours to charge.
Mhm.
But how do you track where charging stations are? Is there an app? Is there a community that keeps that
Yeah,
up to
tons
date?
of apps for that. And one of my favorites is PlugShare. Now, PlugShare not only lists public chargers, but individuals who are offering up chargers at their homes for you to use.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's almost like, B&B or something. You can show up, go to their driveway, plug in, get a charge. So that's a really cool app. And another new one that came out that I really like is called Next Drive, I think it is. I'll have to double check this, but it even took up changes in altitude. So you tell it what kind of car you're in. From that, it knows what kind of range you can get. You tell it where you want to drive. And I plugged in that I wanted to go from the Dallas-Fort Worth area to Corpus Christi. And it figured out that I would be down to 10% of my range when I got to North Austin. There were DC fast chargers there. I could plug in for 2.5 hours and then make it all the way to Corpus. Be really honest with yourself as far as how many times you really do take trips. All of us, want that freedom to go anytime we want. But when you really get down to it, I probably leave town once every 3 months. Well, if I'm doing that, I would save so much money by having an electric car that I could rent a car when I need to do a long trip. Mm-hmm. So think about it that way. It is about the money savings. It is about the environment. It is about how fun that they are to drive. When you put all three of those together, it really is a no-brainer. Just, you got to get your butt in the seat and test drive it. And once you do, it'll win you over.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on. And real quick, go ahead and feel free to plug yourself and the place you work, as well as the organizations you're involved with, where they can find you kind of online.
Okay. Where I work is Classic Chevrolet in Grapevine, Texas. Grapevine's the suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth that has the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. It is the largest Chevy dealership in the world. I work in a building called Electric Avenue. It's just kind of the nickname we gave it. My blog is called My Electric Vehicle Journey. I've been writing it for 6 years now. and basically talk about politics, environment, and mostly about electric cars and how much fun I have with them. And then once a month, there are 10 vehicles that I track, and so you can see how electric vehicle sales are taking off and what I see is coming trends. The Texas Electric Transportation Resources Alliance, or TXETRA, is the lobbying group I'm on the board with down in Austin. If you get a plug-in vehicle, please join, please fill out the surveys. We are your voice with the state government, and we are going to help move this revolution forward by helping the government make sensible decisions. Right now we're talking about where the infrastructure is going to be, but the next big challenge, and some states are failing this challenge, is how do we, as cars get more and more fuel efficient, even the gasoline cars, and it's taxes on gasoline that pay to fix our roads, how are we going to fix our roads and bridges? Well, in my opinion, we've got to divorce the taxation from the fuel type. We're going to have hydrogen, compressed natural gas, gasoline, diesel, electricity, and who knows what else. So let's divorce the taxes from the fuel type and come up with a different way that's more equitable to everyone. Some states are just throwing an extra $150 registration fee on EVs because they don't want to go through the work of figuring out what is the right way to do this. So there are a lot of things to get involved with. TXETRA is your voice with the state government on that. And another big shout out, North Central Texas Council of Governments, EVNT, or EV North Texas Committee. They are a great group of people. They're open to people attending the meetings, and they are helping plan the future of EVs in Texas, and their primary mission is reducing air pollution. So they're a great group to get involved with. They have a great website. If you're in Texas and need information on that $2,500 Texas state rebate, you can either find a link to that website or just look for North Central Texas Council of Governments. But my blog does have a link to that site, so you can find out what you have to do to get that $2,500. And P.S., that was retroactive to September 1st of last year. So even if you bought one in October of last year, you can file and get the $2,500 right now.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, if anybody listening does end up going to see Buzz in Grapevine for their car, please be sure to mention that you heard it here on the podcast. And Buzz, we do a segment on each show called Green Life Hacks, where we share something that we, either a product or a practice that we've implemented in our daily lives that just helps us live a little greener and reduce our carbon footprint. So do you have anything specific? Obviously, you drive an electric vehicle. That could be yours. Is there something else you want to brag on real quick?
Stuff is all old news. Even my lawnmower, my weed whacker, my leaf blower are lithium ion. So we just don't, get gasoline. But this year we put in a couple of raised beds in the backyard and started growing our own vegetables. And, I think that I'm really getting focused on things like pesticides. And, I love really great homegrown tomatoes. My wife loves gardening. So I built her a couple of raised beds for Earth Day this year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Tomatoes, jalapenos, lots of basil, and it's good stuff.
So we're going to stop by your garden after we buy a car so we can snack on all your
bring a bushel basket. We'll load you up.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, gardening is a great way to not only save money because you're feeding yourself, but you're reducing your time to the grocery store. You're reducing the time it takes for you to get the food. It's healthier. There's so many benefits to eating, from your backyard and local. If you're able to not grow your own, you go to a farmer's market even.
Oh yeah. That composting reduces the refuse that you're sending down the disposal. These red tides that happen offshore aren't just industrial farming. It's all of us putting all those leftovers in the disposal, and it goes out to the ocean, and plankton eats it up, and then you have the red tide. So there's all sorts of things we can do. Our next step, we're talking about rainwater retrieval, and we'll see.
That's super cool. Well, Chris or Stefan, did y'all have a green life hack you wanted to share tonight?
Sure. Okay, so
I'm going to get out of here because I'm in the way now. So
no,
thanks for everything.
See you later, Ray. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad because I don't know anything about cars. I just want one that looks nice. drives and is good on gas. But he knows all this stuff. Anyways, so for the last almost 2 months, we've adopted a primarily plant-based diet, and it was this magazine, National Geographic Blue Zones, and it is it was a study done by scientists and Dan Buettner, who works for National Geographic. And if you don't know what blue zones are, they are pockets of the world's population that have a higher than average of people living into their hundreds. So Japan, there's a place in Japan, Italy, Greece, Costa Rica, and in California, Los Lomos, I believe. That's where it is. Anyways, what do they have all in common? They all eat a predominantly plant-based diet. And we've been eating like that for about 2 months, and it's been awesome. We had this really great minestrone soup tonight. My kid eats it. She, if you get 12-year-old to eat veggies. My son is way too picky. We're lucky that he eats quinoa. So, but yeah, it's amazing. And cutting down your meat and your animal product consumption is huge for reduction in agricultural land going to feeding the cows and the pigs and whatever, just feeding them. We have enough agricultural land on this planet to feed everybody. We don't need to be eating as much meat as we do, consuming as many animal products as we do. Now, this isn't a vegan diet or a vegetarian, it's plant-based. So Michael Pollan, who is an American author, has a really great saying. He says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And and next year we will be doing raised garden beds as well. We just planted actually 2 apple trees this spring. So
Yay. That's
awesome.
awesome.
So that's my life.
Reducing your consumption of meat is a big way to one of the top 5, I think, to reduce your carbon footprint.
And it's easy because it's as soon as you find something that you like, this blue zone thing is amazing. It's science. It's not any celebrity endorsements. It's not pop culture or anything like that. This is all science based. And what the science is saying more and more is that the North American diet is killing us. We aren't dying of communicable diseases anymore. We're not dying of accidents or, plagues or anything like that. We're dying of preventable things that we can do something about. So, yeah, I just thought it was really interesting.
Well, real quick, Chris.
That sounds great and all, but unless I hear Gwyneth Paltrow say it, I don't know if I believe it.
Oh, God. If we all followed Gwyneth Paltrow, we'd all be steaming our nether regions and eating freaking detox tea all the time.
Real quick, where can we find you online? I know you're not on social media, but
I'm a little bit.
Other shows.
I'm a little bit. I'm on Marginally Geeky, which we have a show tomorrow. I'm on Epically Geeky, and we just did a show on Saturday. And on Instagram at Cedar Birch Cottage, we live in a small 650 square foot cottage, and so I document that through photos.
Awesome. Stefan, do you have a green life hack for us?
I do. It's a little one, but it's something. Every little bit counts. So I work in a big office building, and whenever I walk by, we have a lot of conference rooms, and whenever I walk by one where the lights are turned on, I'll just pop in real quick and turn the lights off. And sometimes the big, massive TV screen that people use to make presentations on is turned on, even though there's nobody in the room. So I'll just turn it off and, save a little bit of energy.
Awesome. You guys don't have the motion sensors, I guess, right, at work? A lot of companies are installing those.
They do, but even I'll even turn them off anyway. Just
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I do that. I'm right across from the kitchen at work, and it annoys a lot of my coworkers because they come back and it's dark, but I'm like, nobody's in there. I just turn it off all day long. That's one of the good things about being by the kitchen.
So great. Hey, but if you brought in candles, boy, it would really change the ambiance, and everyone would love you.
Creep them out. I guess you're not online still, right? Is there anywhere we can find you online?
If you want to.
So you exclusive here on
guess what my
Sustainably
email
Geeky.
address is. Not giving that up.
Sustainably Geeky has the exclusive for Stefan. So,
That's right.
well, my green life hack is this nifty little container here. I don't know if you guys can tell what it is. It's actually a collapsible water bottle that I use when I travel, and I have been on 10 airplanes in the last 17 days. So this is my go-to on planes, and you got to find the right spot. You squeeze, and it pops open like this. And then when you're done, you push it here. So when you're going on an airplane, you can't bring liquids, and I don't like lugging a giant water bottle. So I bring it in like this, and then I'll go through security and fill it up, save money because those water bottles at the airport are like $5 or something stupid. And then I just have a little clamp on it to put it on my suitcase or bag, and it's pretty cool. So I got it in a camping bag. It's called a Hydra Pack with a K. So if you're interested in getting one, I'm sure they make other brands, but this is the one I got through a camping box that I use for travel more than camping. But great way to not use bottles or, disposable items. So that is my green life hack today, since I've been carrying it around for a lot the last 3 weeks. I can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. And of course, this show, Sustainably Geeky, also our parent show, Epically Geeky and Marginally Geeky, which is our book club. So we're going to be posting this show up under Epically Geeky's umbrella, but we'll also be on Stitcher, iTunes, and Google Play, so you can find us there. Please like us, give us a 5-star rating, comment on our posts to let us know what you want to hear about. If you have ideas, if you want to be a guest on the show, we're looking for people to kind of share their passion about the environment and what they're knowledgeable about. Again, we are so thankful that Buzz Smith was our first guest. How did you say it?
Woo!
EVangelist. And go see him in Grapevine if you're in Texas. He is the guy to talk to about electric vehicles, as you've heard tonight, and I'm sure he'd love to tell you even more if you go up there in person. So thank you again, Buzz, and we will see you guys next month. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Adios.